So, Tyran Jackson, thank you.
All right. First off, Marlene, thank you for such a phenomenal introduction. I appreciate that. As you know, we've known each other for a very long time. It means a lot for you to think of me in order to be able to share this message with you all. I want to thank you all as part of Southern Company Gas for letting me be here to inspire, touch, and motivate you. And I'm going to tell you a couple of things. First off, I want to touch on a couple of things Jesse said that are so relevant when you think about what it means to be resilient. And a couple of things that you talked about was one, that change is anywhere and everywhere. Change is going to happen. And we're going to have our times where we're going to have to deal with disruptions. We're going to have to deal with change in life. What do we do and how we react to that is so important. There's a quote, a message I like to use that says, life is 10% of what happens to us and 90% how we react. So when you start dealing with things that pop up in your life that you didn't see coming, life is full of unexpected challenges, obstacles, and events that are going to occur to us. But it's really up to you to determine how you're going to respond and deal with that. We're going to have our adversity. We're going to have those things that throw us off of our path, the path and the plan that we thought we had. But you can either do one or two things. You can break down or you can bounce back. And I'm going to talk to you about what it means to bounce back when situations arise that you don't expect. So with that said, by a show of hands, who here has been in love before? And so, okay, pretty much everybody can raise their hand. At some point in time, you've had that special person in your life that you've cared about, that you wanted to, enjoy and celebrate life with and do things that you think were going to make the most out of your life and your time. Let's see if this works. Okay. So I want to give you guys a little bit of the backstory of what I'm going to go into. Take you guys back 6 years ago. 6 years ago, in 2018, my wife and I, Malika, we were getting ready to celebrate a momentous occasion. Now, at the time, we were both very busy in life. She was working started out as a school teacher and realized that wasn't what she wanted to do. Transitioned, got an MBA, went into accounting, realized that wasn't where she wanted to be. And then went back and got a master's in HR and started working as an HR manager, HR director. And at this point in time, she was a director at JLL as far as their diversity, equity, and inclusion. Been named moving from the interim director to the director. So she was going through a lot, very busy, very proud of the accomplishments of what was going on. And as we were getting ready to celebrate what was going to be a tremendous milestone, which was going to be our 15th anniversary, we were both having to deal with a lot of change and transition amongst ourselves. What this meant was every other week, she was flying from here to Chicago, where their headquarters was, in order to do her thing. Now, at this same time, I was working as an engineering manager for a company out in Alpharetta that made gas turbine engines. As Marlene said, my background was mechanical engineering. I worked at Rolls-Royce for years, worked for GE, a couple other places. And the way that we were coordinating this was that the weeks that Malika was out of town, I kept my schedule pretty steady to be here. And the reason why that was that we had our son. Our son was Cameron. He was 12 years old at the time. So basically for the 3 months leading up to what was going to be our anniversary, Malika was out of town one week and she would come back. Then I would go out of town the next week and travel to see my customers, my clients, the people I dealt with, and then come back. And so we had this time where even though we were together and we were enjoying life and we were really grinding and pushing hard, we were getting a little bit in this place where the grind was causing us to sort of pull away to some extent. So I say all that to say, as we were leading up to what was going to be our 15th wedding anniversary, we were really excited and looking forward to this time to be able to spend together. And what did we decide to do for our 15th anniversary? Well, a little background on Malika. She she liked to travel. We both like to travel. And a year before, she had went on a girls' trip. And they went to Mexico, and one of the things that she did was she got in the water, she started swimming with dolphins and thought this was the most amazing thing in the world. And so, we came to what was going to be our anniversary and started throwing out ideas and thinking about where do we want to go? What do we want to do? And Malika talked to a couple of friends. She thought about it and said, I want to go swim with pigs. I was thinking to myself, swim with pigs? She's like, yeah. When we're looking at all the different places in the world to go to, one of her friends had said that there was this small island in the Bahamas where you can actually go and swim with feral pigs. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I like bacon, I like ham, but if this is what you want to do, babe, okay, we can do that. We can go out of all the places in the world that we're going to go and spend this time together. Going to the Bahamas is fine. And, her thing was, okay, I want to get a picture with swimming with these pigs. And then I was thinking to myself, okay, this is starting a pattern here. That means next time we're going to have to go swim with, I don't know, with the alligator, with this, I don't know what you want to do next. But I was like, okay, well, we can go to the Bahamas. We'll spend 5 days in paradise, enjoy our time together, and have a wonderful vacation. Spend this time reconnecting and having just a good time planning out how we were going to spend the next 15 years of our life and the 15 years of our life after that, and so on and so forth. So as we're getting close to this day that we're going to actually travel from here to the Bahamas, the day before, I take our son, our 12-year-old son, Cameron, and drive him up to Nashville, Tennessee. This is where his aunt and uncle live, Malika's brother and sister-in-law. And as I take him there, we start talking about how this isn't too uncommon. Mom and dad go on vacation regularly, and he stays with his family, and he was excited to get a little bit of a break away from us, getting to stay with his aunt and uncle, get to do things that he wouldn't necessarily get to do when he's at home, get to eat ice cream late at night, and get to terrorize their dog and beat up on his cousins, and all these things that he was looking forward to. But as I dropped him off, I said, son, don't worry. Have a good time with the family. I'll be back in 1 week to pick you up, and then we'll go on and do the rest of the things that we're going to do for the rest of the summer. Cam was like, Dad, you and Mom need this. And that was a lot of insight for a 12-year-old to say that, but he was excited for the fact that Malika and I to be able to go and celebrate this time together. So I left him there, thought everything was going to be good, jumped in the car, headed back here to get ready to pack and put everything together so we could spend our 5 days in paradise. The next morning, Malika and I, we wake up, catch our flight to the Bahamas. We get there. As we're getting off of out of the airport, and if you've been to some of the Caribbean islands or whatnot or anywhere, as soon as you get off, there's always people who have all of these flyers, all of these adventures, all of these different activities that they want to invite you to be a part of. And as we were getting off, we started getting some of these flyers, and one of these flyers talked about go on this island excursion where you can do a number of different things, see iguanas, eat at a restaurant, and swim with these pigs. And so as we got it, Malika said, you see what I got right here? And I'm like, yeah, I see what you got right there. I'm going to go. But there were a couple of them, and we decided, okay, well, let's just hold on to this for now as we get ready to board the bus to head to our all-inclusive resort and start spending a great time with that vacation. Get there. First 2 days are great. We get to spend time at the beach, get to have some fruity drinks, time at the pool, meet some amazing people. This was a picture that we took on that second day as we were, enjoying just being away from all of the hustle and bustle, everything that we were responsible for having to do prior to then. And so having the time of our lives, enjoying ourselves. We are in paradise. We are together. We are living our life and enjoying things. The next morning, our third day while we were there, that was the day. That was the day that we decided that we would go ahead and partake in one of these tours and go ahead and find these pigs that we're going to swim with and do whatever else we needed to do. But we decided that we were going to be adventurous that day and go ahead and take this trip. So we wake up 6:30 in the morning, excited. Malika is all ecstatic about how we're going to get to do this day. 7:30 in the morning, we're at breakfast, enjoying it. I swear, when you're on vacation, something about it. The food tastes better. The air is so great. I tell you, I had some of the best omelets I ever had. I don't know what it was, but it was great. It was great. 7:45, we find ourselves walking from the restaurant to the edge of the resort where a bus was supposed to pick us up at 8 o'clock. We're the first couple there at the edge of the resort. That's how excited we were about being able to go on this trip. 8 o'clock comes, it's probably about 15 other couples who are coming up. And you know how it is. You're on vacation. You're extremely friendly. You're up there talking to everybody. Where are you from? Okay, how long y'all been together? All of these questions. And we're riding this bus and we're starting to get to know and talk to other people. And everybody here is just happy and excited about this day and getting to have part of this trip, be a part of their anniversary, their vacation or whatnot. 8:40. After making a couple of stops at a couple of different resorts, we finally get to the marina. And as we get to the marina, we're presented with this decision that we have to make. So they have two choices for being able to go on this excursion. One, you can do an 8-hour tour, spend more time touring the island, more time looking at some other animals in different places, more time at the beach where you can swim with these feral pigs, and have a little bit more activity and time to really enjoy. Or you can do this half-day tour where you get to spend a little bit of time at a little stop to get something to eat, a little bit of time looking at the forest, a little bit of time on the beach with the pigs, and then come back. So Malika and I were talking about what did we want to do with our day, knowing that we did have 5 days there, but we wanted to get as much in as possible. So in the midst of it, we had this discussion where I decided that I wanted to get back to the resort earlier that afternoon so I can go golfing. And she said, okay, well, I want to go to the spa. So collectively, we came up with the decision that instead of going on the full day tour, we were going to go on the half day tour. And so as we checked in and we walked down this pier, we took a left because this was the boat to get on in order to do the half day tour. To the right was the one for the full day tour. 8:55, we find ourselves boarding this boat, sitting down, and I find myself saying to myself, okay, this is what life is supposed to be. Happy, the weather's perfect, I'm with the woman of my dreams, enjoying life, and couldn't ask for much more. At 9 o'clock, that boat takes off. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is just going to be another great part to a great trip. And at 9:05, my life changed forever. Let's see if this plays. Does the volume come up? Watch this.
They met nearly 2 decades ago while in college at Tennessee State University. She was an AKA with a megawatt smile, a beautiful heart, and magnetic personality. He, a Kappa, a humble guy, a sweet soul who prided himself on his study habits. They fell in love immediately after meeting at a party, married 2 years later, a son, Cameron. Their friends and family described their marriage as the perfect union between two strong, smart, and God-fearing people. Rand and Malika Jackson were undeniably the envy of most couples.
Tonight, authorities in the Bahamas investigating what caused this popular tour boat to explode, killing one American woman and injuring at least 9 others, leaving behind this incinerated floating shell.
But on June 30th, Malika died while the two were celebrating their 15th wedding anniversary while vacationing in the Bahamas. She was 39. These are pictures of the duo taken the day before tragedy struck. They were enjoying a romantic getaway when the engine of the tour boat they were on suddenly exploded off the coast of Exuma. 10 American tourists were on board the 40-foot charter boat at the time of the incident. Rand lost his leg, broke his collarbone, and fractured his pelvis and spine, suffered second-degree burns, and had his left shoulder dislocated. Malika, who was sitting where the engine exploded, was killed. And now Tyran, who doctors say is a walking miracle, is forced to be a single father. While his wife is gone, these pictures, memories of their son, are all reminders of the love that was and will forever live inside of his soul.
So like I talked about, sometimes life throws us unexpected curveballs. What are we going to do when we have to deal with change that we weren't expecting? At 9:05, I found myself waking up face down on the surface of that burning boat. I was unconscious. The only thing that woke me up was my right leg was literally on fire. There was another passenger that tried to revive me, but when he saw that he couldn't pick me up and that I wasn't waking up, he jumped off the boat. Now, as I was starting to come to in this situation, I'm in shock. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going on. But the second boat that was nearby, which you saw the video from, passengers on that boat were yelling at me. They could see me. They were yelling to me, "Get off the boat, get off the boat, get off the boat." Now, I didn't realize it, but unbeknownst to us, there was a fuel leak coming from the fuel tank that was right below where we were sitting. And something caused the spark, and that's what led to the explosion. Now, as I'm laying there face down, I glanced down at my left foot. I could see my ankle bone. I could see blood rushing out. My right leg is on fire. At this point in time, I don't know where my wife is. All I know is I've got to survive. So as those passengers were yelling to me to get off the boat, I tried to push myself up, but I crumbled. Tried to push myself up again. I crumbled again. At that point in time, I didn't know it. My collarbone was broken in 4 places. As you heard from the narrator, I ended up having a broken right foot, 3rd-degree burns on my right leg, a fractured pelvis, fractured vertebrae, bruised ribs, broken collarbone, and I happened to be in and out of consciousness 5 times. But at that moment, the only thing that I could do was reach my right hand out, put my fingertips in the ridges on the surface of that boat, just to drag myself away from the flames. Drag myself about 5 feet, just so my leg wouldn't continue burning and cooking till I pass out again. Now, we were still in pretty shallow water, and passengers on that second boat, I'm grateful for them because they risked their lives to come and pull me off of the boat. And I'm grateful that they did because about 3 minutes after they got me off of the boat, the second fuel tank exploded. I would not have been here had I stayed on that boat any longer. So as they get me to the boat that they were on, my thought now that I'm still alive is, where is Malika? Where is my wife? Well, Malika was thrown off in a different direction. She was thrown completely off the boat, her and one other passenger. And they were out in the water, in the ocean, in a different direction. There happened to be a 3rd boat that was around, and they picked her and this one other passenger up, and they got them to shore. And they told me that once I got to shore, I was going to go to this clinic where they were headed to. They get me to shore. Got to remember, this is the Bahamas. There's not a lot of infrastructure, a lot of transportation things that could help out there. Malika and this other passenger, they happened to get on the ambulance to go to this clinic, while I had to wait until a good Samaritan who just happened to be riding by, who heard about and saw what happened, put me on a piece of plywood on the back of a pickup truck and took me to this clinic. Now, there was a passenger who was on the full-day tour who Malika and I started talking to him and his wife on the bus ride over. His name was Chris Clark. He happened to be a NFL football player, offensive lineman for the Carolina Panthers at the time. And he was talking to me and trying to keep me calm as I'm riding on the back of the pickup truck on this bumpy ride that, I'm feeling everything. And as I'm talking to him, I'm asking him, how is Malika? How is my wife? And he was trying to keep me calm, tell me that she was going to be all right, that she was okay. But while we were there, while he was with me, I started just spitting off the information that I thought was necessary for him to be able to help me out. Told him what room number we were in, what the safe code was to the safe to get to our passports. Told him my mom's phone number, my sister's phone number. You don't realize how hard it is to remember phone numbers nowadays because, our phones have it. But I gave him this information, told him their names, and said, if you could get in touch with them, please do, and tell them that we've been in an accident and I need their help. Chris said, I got you. And he was able to remember all this information, which was vital for me to still be here. Finally, after taking what seemed like forever on the back of this pickup truck to get to the clinic, I get there and the EMT comes out. He pulls out the stretcher and they put me on the stretcher. And as they wheel me in, this is the first time I hear Malika. I hear her moans, her agony. She's suffering. And as a man, I can't do anything to help her out. They wheel me in, and as I'm being wheeled in, there were 3 bays. In the first bay was Malika. In the second bay was this other passenger. And then they wheeled me here in this third bay. Now, there's one doctor at this clinic. And as I'm there, I'm trying to make myself as still as possible so I can try to hear and try to understand how my wife was doing, if she was okay, if she was going to make it. Now, keep in mind, I never spoke to her from the time that explosion happened to this point. After what seemed like an eternity, and I'm hearing all these beeps and all of these yells and screams, and it's chaotic, the doctor finally comes over to me. And he asked me, am I okay? And I'm like, look, I'm hurt. But my question is my wife okay? The doctor tells me, he doesn't answer my question. He tells me, we can't treat you here, that we have to send you and this one other passenger to the good hospital. They were going to fly me from Exuma to Nassau, where they actually had better treatment. And at this point in time, my left foot had been dangling. I lost a lot of blood. They tried to wrap it back up. And so as I'm hearing this, I asked him, what about my wife? And he told me, your wife will come later to that hospital. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm trying to rationalize this. If they're sending me and this other passenger now and sending Malika later, then she must be doing better off than I am, or else they would send her first. They would have done something if she was injured more so. So they gave me a little bit of calmness, thinking that, okay, 1, she must not be injured nearly as badly, and 2, I'll have the opportunity to see her later, and we'll be able to figure this out. So the next thing I know, I'm getting taken out of this bay, put on the back of an ambulance, driven to an airport, put on an air ambulance, flown to Nassau. They get me into emergency surgery, and they start telling me that, okay, you've got a lot of injuries here. They put me through CAT scan. That's where they figured out everything that was wrong with me. But they said that I had to go into surgery to get my left foot reattached to my leg. And at this point in time, I have no option. I have no say in the matter. I know they're trying to save my life. So I find myself being put to sleep, and I wake back up later, and my foot is in a cast. And I'm thinking, okay, if nothing else, by the time I get out of surgery, Malika should be here. So I found myself waking up in ICU. And as I'm waking up there's a nurse in the room. And as she sees me start to wake up and come to, she leaves and she goes and gets the doctors. So after about 3 minutes, 2 doctors come in the room. And as soon as the 2 doctors come in the room, I ask them, where is my wife? Is my wife here yet? The 2 doctors, they look at each other confused. They don't answer me. They step back out of the room. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the most obvious question I could have been asking. They knew my wife was in this accident. They knew that she was supposed to be here by now. Time has passed. She should be here. Where is she? 5 minutes pass by, and the 2 doctors, they come back in. One of the doctors tells me, Mr. Jackson, we hate to inform you, but your wife didn't make it. And I'm thinking to myself, now I'm an eternal optimist. I'm thinking didn't make it. Okay, she didn't make it. What you mean is that the airplane that flew us here to the hospital, it must have had a problem, or they must have had to refuel or something that was going back to pick her up, and then she hasn't made it yet. No, Your wife died at that clinic. They didn't want to tell you that before they put you on the plane and brought you here. So here I am. What was supposed to be one of the most fantastic times of Malika and our lives together. We're celebrating this milestone. We're in paradise. We're in a place where happiness is expected in the norm. And I have to hear the news that my wife is no longer here. I cried myself to sleep that night because I was in shock and didn't understand why this had to happen to us. Why she had to be taken away while we're on vacation. I wake up the next morning thinking that this was all a nightmare, but I find myself in the same ICU room and realizing that this is reality. As part of having to embrace that reality, I had to do something that I didn't want to do, but I knew I had to do. Remember that 12-year-old boy that I had dropped off earlier that week and said, I'll be back to pick you up? I had to call him. I had to tell Cameron over the phone, son, mom and dad have been in a horrible accident, and mom's never coming home again. Dad, no! And I'm, son, we're going to get through this. But to have to not only deal with the heartbreak of losing my rock, my best friend, the mother of my child, the person who I was building empires with, but also have to break my son's heart and tell him over the phone that you'll never get to see her again. It crushed me even more so as I was laying in that hospital bed. Now, in the midst of the conversation, we did talk, and he asked me if I was going to be all right. And I told him, I'm lying through my teeth. Yes, son, I'm going to be okay. And we'll work this out. We'll figure this out. But deep down, I didn't know what was going to happen. I'm still in shock. I'm still feeling surprised and don't know how to process what's really going on here. As the day progresses, I'm feeling worse and worse. And as I'm laying in this hospital bed, I'm looking up. There's an EKG monitor that's over my head. And as I look up, I'm noticing something. It seems like I'm getting worse and worse and worse. Well, what happened was my foot that they tried to reattach was actually infected. And now infection was starting to go through my body. And as a result of this, I was laying there, literally in my deathbed, dying. I saw all my vital signs start to go from green to yellow to red. And in the midst of that, I'm starting to process the fact that I am about to die here. I'm laying in this hospital bed. They're not doing a great deal to treat me. They stopped dealing with the infection and was just giving me tramadol to deal with the pain. And I was thinking back to some of the things and decisions that I made in my life that caused this to happen. What did I do to deserve losing my best friend, losing my wife, and being in this accident? What did I do to be on the verge of losing my life? As I'm laying there, I'm thinking to myself and coming to grips with the fact that, okay, Cam is going to have to live with somebody else. Somebody else is going to raise our son. That I'm no longer going to be here. That this was meant to be. I'm truly broken, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. And come to believe that the next time I closed my eyes was going to be the last time I closed my eyes. As I go to sleep, I'm thinking that I won't wake up again. Now, there were a lot of things that were happening in the background. And as I woke up, my vital signs were yellow and red, but I did wake up that next day. And in the midst of everything that was happening, remember Chris, the gentleman who rode on the back of the pickup truck with me. he was able to call my mom and reach out to my sister. And before they knew it, they were doing everything they could to try to get to me in the Bahamas. They were trying to, once they got there, they contacted the right people to try to do what they could to get me out of the Bahamas. And in the midst of all of this, somehow my passports had gotten misplaced. And so there was all of this chaos and commotion about getting me out of there. But somehow I woke up that next morning and I found myself pretty much being confiscated from the hospital bed and put on an airplane and flown to a level 1 trauma center in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And when they got me there, I was bad. I was bad. But if he hadn't remembered all that information and got that process rolling when it did, I wouldn't be here. It was that Sunday afternoon, the day before, when the embassy actually started getting in touch with my family and Malika's family to let them know what happened. So he let them know a day in advance, and that day was important. Because when I got to Florida and the doctors, they started looking at me, they put me in emergency surgery. They started checking my vitals. And basically what they told my family was, if I would have spent one more day in the Bahamas, I probably would have been dead. 2 more days, I definitely would have been dead. So they were going to have to do whatever they could to ensure that I survived. And what that led to was me going to emergency surgery where they had to amputate my left leg to stop the infection for me to survive. Now, in the midst of this time, I ended up going through 9 surgeries over the course of 5 days. Multiple surgeries on my left leg, surgeries on my foot, surgeries to help put me back together physically. And after one day where I went through 5 surgeries, that's when things were starting to slow down a little bit for me. I'm finally having the time to process some of what's going on and sort of try to make sense of all the change, of all the chaos, of everything that has happened to me. And there was a voice that was talking to me, and the voice was telling me different things and telling me a couple of points that stood out to me. One, that it was Malika's time to go. And sometimes we have no control of when that point in time happens. But for me, I had to come to grips with the fact that it was her time to move on. Also became clear to me that there were 3 different times that I could have been taken. I could have been taken when that boat exploded. I could have been taken when my vital signs went from green to yellow to red in that hospital. I could have been taken when I went through those 5 surgeries in one day because I was very unstable. But I was still here. And it was becoming clear what that purpose was at that time. But it was greater than anything that I had known to that point. That this theme kept coming back up to be resilient. Be resilient. Now, at that point in time, I didn't think hard about what it meant to be resilient. But the message was clear that the obstacles that I've overcome just to get to that point were nothing compared to the obstacles I was going to have to face moving beyond that. And that if I wanted to not just survive, but to thrive, I had to make a conscious choice. And that choice was going to be to choose to be resilient. And in the midst of this, there's a message that I like to share because I didn't think about it deeply at the time, but what it meant to be resilient. And when it became clear to me what I understood, if I wanted to be able to move forward, if I wanted to thrive and not just survive, if I wanted to make the most out of what was left of my life, I was going to have to understand that resilience is not about regaining what was lost, but it's about reshaping what still remains. And it's what you do with what still remains that's going to dictate your life moving forward. These were some of the realities I was going to have to deal with. And once that became clear in my mind, I knew that it was going to be difficult. I knew it was going to be hard to move forward from that. But if I was able to make that conscious choice to be resilient and deal with the obstacles, deal with the pain, deal with the challenges that were going to come with it, I had a better chance of moving forward powerfully in life. this was just the beginning of my story. And so as I'm there, I'm coming to, I go through essentially 2 weeks at the hospital where they get me to a point where they actually are ready to let me go. Now, at this point in time, my right foot is in a cast, my left shoulder is in a sling, got a back brace, and my left leg is missing. But they've done all they could do there. What was going to be the next step? Well, with my family there and with the doctors and talking through things, it seemed like the logical step was going to be for me to go to rehab. Basically be at a medical facility that could help me start to rehab, with the goal being to get me to a point where I could eventually put weight on my right foot again, where I could put weight on my shoulder, where I could use crutches and get to a point where I could be mobile again in that fashion. So as I'm in this hospital in Florida, they started making calls. Now, most of my family actually lives in Nashville, Tennessee. And as we were starting to look through options here, one of the first places that came up was Vanderbilt. They have a phenomenal medical facility, and they reached out to them and thought for sure, with my sister living in Nashville, that would be a good place for me to be because family could check on me. So they call, send all of my paperwork, all of the medical documents. A day goes by, another day goes by. Then it turns out that I'm rejected, that they didn't want to take me into their rehab facility. I'm thinking to myself, I've been through so much already, and you don't want to accept me. Why? So the doctors, they were like, okay, that's fine, there's other options. I grew up in Alabama, and I still had family there. And the next place that came up was to go to Birmingham, UAB. They have a great medical facility there. Tried to contact them, did the same thing, give them all of the paperwork. Another day goes by, they reject me as well. Here I am, I'm already emotionally broken. Physically, I'm in pieces, I'm in shambles. And now I'm having to try to understand why nobody wants to help me. Well, the doctors, they come back and say that these rehab facilities don't want to take you because you need 2 functional limbs in order for them to do anything with you. And so here I am. The only thing I could use is my right arm. Here I am being rejected. I'm already at a low point. And now I'm having to come to grips with the fact that I don't know what the next move is. But in the midst of it, it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Because what ended up happening was they told me that I needed to go and just be somewhere where I could heal and let some of these other injuries recover to a point where I could actually begin to make progress. So after a lot of thought, a lot of decisions, I ended up going and living with my sister for 6 weeks. And over this time, being able to start the process of physically healing as well as trying to emotionally start to get myself back together. So my point with that is that it actually gave me an opportunity to emotionally get to process what was going on. I was with loved ones. I was in a place where I could be at least somewhat to myself. And it gave me time to truly start to reflect on some of the things that was going on in my life at that point in time. And so sometimes we might face those rejections, but ultimately it happened to be a win for me in order to go that route and do something that I didn't think was right. Now, I want to talk a little bit about resilience, and I'm going to get back to the story in a second. But when I say about resilience, what is resilience and what does it mean to us? And, a lot of people think, okay, I'm just dealing with some hardships, I'm going to bounce back. But part of my true definition of resilience deals with not just how you deal with, cope with, come to terms with the breakdowns that happen in our life, but you use those and you leverage that setback for a stimulus or for a catalyst for positive growth. When you run into your obstacles, when you run into your challenges in your personal life, and the functionality that you have today here at Southern Company, think about the challenge is going to make me better. And as it was alluded to earlier about Jesse, how are you going to grow from that? When you are being resilient and establishing this resilient mindset, you're able to look at that obstacle as an opportunity. And that opportunity can propel you into places that you may not have ever thought you would be. And so what we want to do is use those challenges in order to be a better version of ourselves in the future. Now, why does this matter? I want to say that for us to be resilient, it helps us emotionally. And sometimes, we're in a space and time now, and I'm a big mental health advocate, and I'll get into that a little bit later. This is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. May was Mental Health Awareness Month overall. There's a lot of pressures, a lot of things that are going on in our lives before we even get to some of the external things. Family issues, challenges at home, maybe kids, whatever. There's a lot of different things that are going on that add to the stress that we have to deal with every day. Are we doing the right things to deal with that stress, to counter the depression, to fight the anxiety? I was in a point where I was truly having to deal with a lot of things, grief, survivor's remorse, on top of this depression, anxiety, PTSD. And so, but that was a life-altering situation. Don't minimize the impact that the small challenges that we go through every day tend to have a cumulative effect on how we operate and function. When we want to show up in the world, we have to be mindful that all of these other challenges are going to cause us to not be the person that we're used to being or that we think we are in our head. So when you're resilient and you develop the right resiliency skills, you're able to manage your emotions and be able to deal with those challenges better. You start to be able to look at things with a different outlook than what you are if you're not able to cope and come to terms with those factors. So keep that in mind as we talk about what resilience is. Resilience can, if we're not resilient, it can limit us from moving forward. And now sometimes we all have this fear or this concern or this anxiety about what the future may hold. And in some ways, it can limit us from being able to even think beyond where we are today. By building the skills of being resilient, you can find yourself overcoming that fear. And you're not as concerned. There's going to be the rejection that comes up from time to time. There's going to be things that throw us in a different direction in life. Our trajectory may be changed. One of the key aspects of being resilient is being able and willing to pivot when things aren't going the plan that you thought. Now, I thought I was going to be an engineering manager or an engineer for the rest of my life. I thought my purpose was to provide for my wife and son and to continue going down that path. But it became clear to me when I was in that hospital bed that I was not going to go back to the life that I had, that I was not going to be an engineer. Now, there was a different destiny, and I had to accept that was going to be my reality, but I didn't know what that was. But you have to be willing. You have to be willing to be able to pivot and move in a different direction when that's what's being called upon you. So if you want to move forward, there are going to be times where you're going to have to find that strength within, use that resiliency to move forward. And then, as I said, it's needed to accomplish our goals. And I'll get into goals a little bit later. But nothing is ever going to go as smoothly as you think it is. That's just life. We all hear the phrase, life be lifing. But if you're more resilient, you're going to be able to deal with those small hiccups, those things that come up along the way that's going to make you have to do something a little bit differently, but keep moving forward. When you find people who are weak from a resiliency standpoint, the smallest thing causes them to crumble. And you don't want that to be the situation that you find yourself in because, look, chaos is reality. That's part of what we have to deal with. As leaders, it's going to be up to you because goals are going to be important for the people who are following you to understand, to be clear on, and be able to move forward with. And in order to do those things, you're going to have to be able to deal with not just your challenges, but the challenges that they face as they pop up. Now, this just gives an idea of what being more resilient looks like. And you can ask yourself, this is an evaluation method of being able to see if this is you. And as leaders, you can look and say, do I check this box, or is this something I need to develop and grow? As I stated, I was already an eternal optimist before. So I was looking at the positive side of things, even when things were bad. But if you have that positive outlook, it's going to help you out with your attitude and when you deal with things as they come up in the future. How do you control yourself, and what do you believe in yourself? You are all empowered here for a specific role, a specific function. But before you can be great at it, you have to believe you can be great at it. So if you have that belief, that confidence, and able to control your discipline, your habits, your consistency, is going to help you be more resilient. Some of the others should talk about being able to deal with adverse situations and being adaptable, being flexible. Some people are very rigid, very fixed in their ways and firm in their ways. And when you are this, when change does come up, it makes it hard for them to deal with it. I'm sure you all have that person who, when something new is brought up, their first response is negative. That they can't deal with the change because they are so fixed in a certain way that they can't open their mind, open their thoughts to new ways, new approaches of dealing with challenges. Don't be that person. You have to be open to the flexibility. And if you don't have it, there's ways to develop it to be able to be more willing to adjust your thinking in order to accommodate what the goal is in your situation. And then just touching on a couple of these, just being able to be aware of your emotions. And going through this process that I went through, I realized I had to become more open, more vulnerable, more in tune with myself. I'll touch on this a little bit later, but it was a discovery, or I call it a rediscovery process, a rediscovery of who I was at this point in life in order to figure out who I was going to be and how I was going to be moving forward. As humans, as individuals, we go through changes in life, and we change the way that we think. We go through some level of transformation. We might not recognize it, but others who may have known us from an earlier point in life can see those things. Are you willing to accept that you've gone through these changes and be able to embrace that as you move forward? So, as I said, take a look at these and ask yourself, am I resilient? Or can I become more resilient? Now, the truth of the matter is we all can become more resilient. Resiliency is a skill. Some people naturally have it to a certain extent, but I see that like so many other things. Some people can sing. Okay, if you can sing, you get a little bit better, but you already sound good. Some people are athletic. Some people can run miles and not think anything of it. Part of that is natural, but that doesn't mean you can't train, you can't improve, you can't work to be better at it. Because the one thing that is promised in this world is change. And you're going to have to deal with those things in your function, in your role, and in life as a whole. So how are you going to be better suited to deal with that moving forward? Now, I want to go ahead because where I want to take this is what I have and what I would like to share with you guys is my roadmap to resilience. And what that is I'm going to, if you just take one of them, one of these points that I share, apply to your life, you'll become more resilient and be mindful of how that resiliency is helping you move forward. The first point on this roadmap to resiliency that I want to share with you guys deals with reflection. And when I say reflection, think about where you are today. Now think about in your role today, what you're doing. What has happened in the past that has, one, prepared you to get here where you are, and two, lessons that you've learned in the midst of that that can help you in the future. A lot of times, we tend to focus on what's next, what's in front of us. We deal in the present, and whatever comes our way is the next thing that we're attacking and we're going after. Not too often we spend the proper amount of time of looking back, especially when something has happened to us that we actually need to take that time, that mental capacity and thought, and determine why did this happen and what caused it to go that way. We don't always look back at the lessons that we learn from certain situations because we're so eager to move forward. Now, what you see here, this is a picture of me. I'm at my sister's house. This is about 3-4 weeks after the accident. And I'm having to go through this level of physical therapy. I'm trying to stretch my legs, my tendons, which is part of what they wanted me to do if I ever wanted to get back to a place of walking again with the prosthetic. Now, as I was going through this, I had to look back and reflect. Now, there are a lot of different things I was reflecting on, but as I was thinking back as to certain events that have happened in my life, I thought back to what happened when I was in my early 30s. Now, I was a pretty good basketball player way back in the day, and I thought I was in still pretty good shape and all. I went to the gym one day, got me a good leg workout in, and as I was getting ready to leave, I walked by the basketball court. And what did I see? I saw these 18, 20-year-old kids out there running, playing, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm still in good shape. I can get on out there. I can go play a little bit. So I get out there, start playing, thinking I'm doing all right, doing pretty good. This 18-year-old point guard, I'm guarding him. He's coming up court, and he tries to shake me a little bit. He goes right. I go to the right. He crosses back over and goes left. I'm on the ground on the right. Now, as I'm on the ground, I thought I heard a gunshot. Bam! And as I'm laying there, I'm feeling something doesn't feel right in my calf muscle. And I look down, and I start feeling this tingling, and I realize I popped my Achilles tendon. One of the worst pains you could go through. And I find myself limping up out of that gym, and Malika was telling me, Ty, you know you shouldn't have been out there playing with them kids. And I'm thinking to myself, look, I know you're right. I know I shouldn't have, but here I am. And what that led to me have to do was to go through surgery, but go through this physical therapy. 3 days a week, I had to go and start doing this work to let that tendon heal, to start to regain strength to it, to be able to learn how to put pressure to walk on it again, because my ultimate goal was to be able to get to where I could move on my own again and be there with Cameron and be there with Malika and so on and so forth. But what that did was it showed me that if you're consistent and you do what you have to do physically, you can get back to where you were. So I got back to a point where I was able to run on it 9 months later. And Malika told me, boy, you better not ever go back out there and play basketball again. And so, a year go by, some of my buddies, they were like, we're going to be in this 35 and up basketball league. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's more my speed right there. I can go ahead and do that. And she rolled her eyes at me, but she was like, okay, I'll let you go on out there and do that. I get out there first game, I am balling. I am going through legs. I'm knocking down jump shots. I'm feeling great. On a fast break, I'm going to the basket. I plant to go up for a layup. And as I plant, I hear this pop. Find myself on the ground again. Tore my ACL, my PCL, and my patella tendon. And I'm thinking to myself, damn, here we go again. I have to go through 9 months of physical therapy once again, 3 days a week. It's different, but it's still what I have to go through in order to get the quality of life that I wanted back. To be able to still be present, be there for Cameron, for Malika, and just to be able to have a good life. So I recover. And at that point in time, Malika said, nah, you're not touching the basketball again. So I was cool with it that time. But as I'm reflecting through all of this, even though I didn't realize it at that time, those failures, those situations were preparing me for what I was going to have to endure in this situation. The event occurred. I was developing a resilient mindset when I was going through the Achilles recovery, when I was going through the patella recovery, and I knew what to expect. I did the work, and as a result of doing the work, I was able to get back to a place where I could operate and function like normal again. When you run into adversity, when you run into the challenge, understand that part of it is being able to leverage those past experiences, use those past experiences, and do the work to recover from it. Because if you can do the work, then you can bounce back and get to a place where you're better. Now, I'll get into how I got better at a future point in time, but take that time to reflect on the lessons that you've learned in the midst of it. So that's my first point. Spend some time reflecting on the challenges that you faced. Here's a question for you. Have your past mistakes and failures, have they built you for what you're currently facing? Maybe over the course of this 3 days, you think back about that, because there has been something in your journey to get to where you are today that's going to prepare you for what you got in the future. So my next point on this roadmap to resilience is find your obsession. What are you obsessed about? And when I say having an obsession, we have to have a laser-like focus on what we need to do in order to get to where we want to be. We're going to have distractions that are going to pop up in our lives. We're going to have these situations where you're going to have demands from other groups, demands from people outside of work, where you're going to have people pulling at your time, or even we're just going to be not focused where we need to be. When you can find it in yourself to make something so critical, so important, that it keeps you going, and that you have clarity on what your goal is at that point in time, you're more likely to achieve that. I was in a place, this was a couple months after, or a couple of weeks after the accident, where my shoulder, like I said, was cracked in 4 places, or broken in 4 places. And I had to do something, like take a 2-pound dumbbell and do this over and over and over again in order to start to get strength back there. That focus on that was going to be one of the most important things I needed to do at that stage in my life, because ultimately I was in a place where, even though I was hurt for the loss of Malika, I knew that I had to be there for Cameron. And I needed to get myself back physically to a place so I could actually work to get the other parts emotionally, mentally back in line so I could be present for him. So as much as it hurt, the pain, the physical pain, after I did it, I had to take something, because it was so painful to do these exercises and do this thing. But it got to a point where I was dreaming about that 2-pound dumbbell. I was dreaming about, they would take a little tennis ball and they'd bounce it off a table and throw it at me, and I'd have to come up and try to catch it in order to be able to get that flexibility back in my shoulder. I was having to do some of these exercises to get strength back in my legs, because I lost 30 pounds between the time of the accident and about a month and a half afterward. Depression does that to you. You don't want to eat. You don't want to have to deal with things. And so anyway, but where I was going is that I was clear on my goal, and I was going to try to make sure that nothing stopped me from what I had to do at that moment. And to me, that physical therapy and recovery in those early stages was what was going to be necessary for me to get back to a place where I was going to be functional. Now, after I got out of the hospital, or while I was in the hospital, they said if you're lucky, you will be able to get a prosthetic and walk in about 8 months, maybe 10 months. But by being obsessed with what I had to do in order to recover, I found myself starting to walk. These were my first steps on crutches. This was about 2 months after the accident, where I finally got the strength in my shoulder and in my right foot to be able to support me and allow me to move. This is me taking my first steps 3.5 months after the accident. And all of this was due to being obsessed with, I know that this is what I've got to do if I want to get back to the life that I want to live. So think about what it is in your life that you need to do in order to have that obsession. And ask yourself, what are you obsessed with? What areas of your life do you need to get that laser-like focus that you may not currently have? And how are you going to tune out those distractions in order to reach your goals? This is about having clarity on what your goals that you want to accomplish are, having clear vision of what you need to do, and as leaders, you got to be mindful that you are guiding the direction for your teams. So by being clear on what your goals are and being obsessed with making them happen, you increase your likelihood for the success and the outcomes that you're looking for. My third point on this roadmap to resilience. And am I good on time, Marlene? Think so. Okay. Okay. I'll speak through this a little bit more. Acceptance. Acceptance. I had to accept the reality of my situation. And as you're going through this grieving process, there are different stages to it. And I had to come to grips with an acceptance of the fact that my life, my new normal, was not going to be the same as my normal before. If you remember back to what I told you guys earlier, as I was getting back to a place where I was physically capable to move again, I had to start going through the emotional recovery. And this also dealt with my son and his emotional recovery. Remember I said that Malika and I were going through this time where she was gone on work trips, and it would just be me and Cam together for a period of time. In Cam's mind, he processed it as if Mom was just gone on a long work trip and tried to compartmentalize the fact that it was real that she was never coming back. The emotional heartache associated with trying to come to grips with the reality of what we needed to move forward with wasn't easy. For me, I had to go through a great deal of grief counseling and therapy to be able to get put back together emotionally. Had to do the same for my son. This was what was going to get us out of this state of denial. Denial is the enemy of acceptance. And if you want to get to a place of acceptance, that's where you can actually get to a place where you can accept what has been done and actually move forward with life. So I ask you, when it comes to some of the challenges that we face, sometimes we find ourselves so fixated on what has occurred and what has happened that it limits us from being able to move forward, as I said earlier, but work to try to get to that place of acceptance of the reality. And going through the grief counseling, and going through, like I said, I had survivor's remorse. I felt responsible for what happened. I had to be able to learn to deal with my emotions, learn to process what was going on. The therapy and the counseling helped me understand that I had to go through this healing process, but it also led to me starting to understand who I was at this stage in my life. And it allowed me to tap into certain characteristics that I didn't realize that I had before. I started journaling a lot more. I didn't think that, I was never a writer, but in being able to actually take the thoughts out of my head and put them down on paper, they became real. And by me doing this and my son doing this, it allowed us to be able to at least come to grips with the fact that Malika was not coming back, and we were going to have to figure out how we were going to be strong and move forward from that. So my question to you, this is a point where I had to accept my reality. You see me looking in the mirror. You see me having to come to the reality that I'm not like everybody else anymore. When I look in the mirror, people are going to look at me different. I had to rediscover who I was. My identity from that point in life moving forward was going to be different than who I was prior to. The sooner I came to grips with this, the easier it was for me to move forward and progress. My question to you is, what are you in denial of that's preventing you from accepting your reality and how you're going to move forward? Next on this roadmap, well, just going back to acceptance for a second, one other point I want to emphasize here is that when we deal with change management, that is a key part of being able to get to a place of acceptance. Like Jesse alluded to earlier, the one thing that the world is getting larger and the world is ever changing. We're going to have to be able to adapt and deal with those changes. I was going to have to adapt to being an amputee. I was going to have to adapt to having to go to my son's football games and people looking at me a certain way because I look different now. These are things that you have to realize that it's not going to always be perfect. It's not going to always be something that you can avoid. But when you find yourself being emotionally and mentally strong enough to be able to deal with that change, you're finding yourself becoming more and more resilient and able to deal with it and not let it keep you from moving forward in a powerful manner. Next on this roadmap, decisions, the decisions that we make. Remember earlier I said I had to make a conscious choice, a choice to be resilient, and that was going to propel me in a trajectory that was different than what I thought of before in life. You all are leaders. You all are managers. You all are people who you're going to be placed with situations where you're going to have to decide. You may not always have all the information that you think you need or that you want in order to determine how you're going to move forward, but it's up to you to go ahead and make those decisions. You make a decision to get up every day and be the best person you can be. You know you have gifts, abilities, beliefs, and use that in order to guide your decisions. Now, keep this in mind, your decisions will determine your direction. Meaning, based on the decisions that you make, you can either make decisions that get you closer to your goals, or you can make decisions that can move you further away. So you can't take the decisions that come across lightly. Be mindful. Don't just go about the obstacles and the challenges when they come up and throw a half-ass answer out there or make a decision that you haven't truly processed and put thought in. Be mindful of what the decision and the potential outcome that can be a result of that and how it will work for you. I was at a point, and what you see here was 3 months after the accident, it was going to be what would have been Malika's 40th birthday. And at this point, emotionally, I had gone from being in the state of complete isolation from everyone to actually trying to find myself again. And I had a decision to make. People were asking me, what was I going to do for Malika's birthday? And as opposed to making the decision to just do something privately, I'd healed to a point where I thought it was a good idea for me to honor her and celebrate her birthday with the people who knew her and who knew us. And emotionally, it was something that I needed to do in order to heal. It allowed me to let people pour into me and to be able to celebrate what would have been a special day for her. And it brought smiles back to my face. It helped me out emotionally to recover. But I say all of this to say that it was a decision. And this was a decision that I made that, like I said, helped me start to get closer to who I truly was and was going to be moving forward instead of being completely isolated. That isn't always recommended for someone going through grief, depending on where they are in that process. But for me, it was a great move because it allowed me to start to find something to be a little happy about in the midst of the severe pain. But as I said earlier, keep in mind when you're presented opportunities that your decisions are going to make a huge impact. And don't just sit on it. Understand the pros and the cons. Evaluate those things when you're making these decisions. Ask yourself this question: what decisions are you not making that are limiting your success? Sometimes we just hope somebody else makes those decisions for us. And if that's what's necessary, make sure that it happens. But don't just wait and let the world make the decision for you. As leaders, you're empowered. Your intent is to be able to make decisions to help guide how this company and how everything that you deal with operates moving forward. Okay, as I try to round up on this roadmap to resilience, I'm going to go a little bit quicker about a couple of different things. The next letter on this roadmap is motivation. Ask yourself, what is the source of your motivation? What is going to drive you to keep going? Now, this was interesting. About a year before Malika and I went on this trip, we had a conversation. We spent a little time. We were in our basement. We were watching a movie. And in this movie, the lead character died suddenly early in the movie. And after we finished watching it, it led to these what-if questions. What if? Well, I asked Malika, what if something happens to you? What would you want me to do? Now, I didn't think anything of it at the time. This was an important conversation. Malika thought about it for a second, and she said, Ty, if something happens to me, I wouldn't want you to mourn forever. I would want you to go out and find happiness again in your life. She told me, first she thought for a second, and then she came up with this list. And on this list were the names of 7 women that she said under no circumstances whatsoever. They better not be in my house. They better not be around my son. They better not be cooking casseroles and bringing them to you. She told me she was going to come back and haunt me if that happened. But what resonated most was the last thing that she said. And what she said is, if something happened to me, I want you to make sure you do everything you can to make sure that the only part of me that's still left on this earth is well taken care of. And that was our son, Cameron. And so when I didn't have that desire, when I didn't have that will to keep going, when I didn't want to get out of bed, when I didn't want to keep going to therapy and doing the things that I needed to be put back together, I thought back about where my motivation truly was. That was my son, Cameron, years ago as we were starting to figure out what our new normal looked like. And at this point in time, I realized that I had a bigger purpose, that purpose was related to make sure that I raised this young man to be the man that he was needing to be. That was my motivation. That was my promise to Malika, to make sure that I did that. And so my question to this is, and this is now, he just graduated from high school last week. So doing the work to make sure that he's growing up to be the person that he's supposed to be, and making sure that I honor the legacy and honor the request of my former wife. But my point to this is, ask yourself, what is your source of motivation? And as leaders, I want to give you this other challenge. You have teams, you have individuals that are going to be coming to you, and you have to start as a resilient leader understanding what's going to be their source of motivation. Everybody is different, but you've got to look at each person and understand that what might motivate one person may not be the same motivation for the next. But in essence, you've got to also understand the source of your motivation to keep going and be a strong, resilient, powerful leader for Southern Company Gas. As I get ready to round this up, I'm going to talk about the next A. It's your attitude. It's your attitude. What are your thoughts, your belief, your outlook and approach towards the challenges that you're facing? Now, you can have a positive attitude towards things, or you can have a negative attitude, or you can have somewhere in between. Look at me right there. Despite everything that was going on, I had a smile on my face. And this positive attitude and this positive outlook towards dealing with everything that was going to happen. I had every reason to be broken, and I was physically. But by having a positive attitude, it led me to being able to look and believe that I could do more and more. I mentioned to you guys earlier that I was going through this physical rehab, and I was sticking with it, and I was being consistent. And before you knew it, like I said, in 3 months, I was starting to walk again. And my walk turned into a jog, and my jog turned into me being able to do things, jump over boxes and whatnot. And as a result of that, I kept going. My attitude was keep pushing. I had a friend of mine tell me, well, Ty, if you're doing all of that, then you need to come out and run a 5K with us. And I thought to myself, I ain't no runner. I'm not going to run a 5K. But then 6 months after the accident, I found myself running 5Ks. Now, this is the power of having the right attitude and knowing that if you're doing the work, if you're looking at it from a positive standpoint, I never would have done this had what happened to me not happened. But this was a sign that I could go above and beyond what I even believe by having the right attitude. Check your attitude. Is it encouraging growth, success? Are you looking at what you are capable of and beyond what you're capable of? Or is it holding you back? Ask yourself, can you change your attitude and your approach towards the challenges that you're facing and dealing with? Find that mirror, look in it and ask yourself these questions, and you'll understand if this is an area I can improve to be more resilient. Finally, I want to talk about the P for this roadmap to resilience, and it's about the process. As Marlene alluded to, I got an engineering background. Despite everything that's happened, I still think of things as a process. What is a process? In my mind, a process is a specific set of actions that get you from where you are today to where you want to be. When we think about it from the standpoint of what we have to do here as leaders, that comes to strategic thinking. What actions do you need to take to reach the goals that you set forth? Now, some people just operate and just do things and they let the process happen to them. But you got to take ownership of what those actions are, have clarity on what those steps are in order to get to where you want to be in order to get there. Everywhere you go and just speak to our group. And this was the first time I was asked to speak. This was not like me doing a technical presentation on how to improve performance of an engine for a hovercraft. No, this was actually talking about what I experienced, the ups and downs of going through loss at a relatively young age and having to bounce back. I was nervous. I was afraid. I didn't know how to go about doing this, but I had to study. I had to understand that, like a lot of things in life, when we put our mind to it and understand that we have the right process in order to be successful at what we're doing, then the steps that we take every day, small wins every day, get us closer to our destination and our goal. My process led to me learning basically how to be a professional speaker, how to be able to take a story and be able to use it to touch, inspire, motivate, and push people beyond the limits of their own thinking. As a result of it, it led to me being able to launch a best-selling book and to be able to be doing more and more things that led to me understanding the value of being coached and understanding that if I can learn from the right people, align myself with the right mentors, and actually execute, that I have a better chance of reaching my purpose. And as a result of this, understanding that process has allowed me to do things that I never thought I would, but it was important for me to be able to understand that life was not just going to happen, that I had to understand, define my process, and walk and follow that process to get closer to where I want to get to. As leaders, you all have the control and the power to help determine that process for yourselves as well as your teams in order to get the change that you're looking for. So my question to you is, do you have clear vision of what the process you need to follow in order to get the transformation for OI3 as well as your individual teams to move forward? Remember what I said earlier, resilience. Resilience is not about regaining what was lost, but reshaping what still remains. What has happened in the past has happened in the past. You got this day to make the most of it, and you have the power to define what your future looks like. If you are a resilient leader, you will take on that challenge, and you will exceed, and you will be great at it. My name is Tyran Jackson. I appreciate you all listening to me and allowing me to have the opportunity to just share with you part of my journey on resilience and how you can find the resilience within your own life and create the best opportunity to be the leaders that you are intended to be. I thank you for your time. I do a great deal as far as helping others as a life coach to be able to get clarity on what they're doing and those who are going through traumas, tragedies, or transitions in life and help them make the transformation so they can be triumphant again. This is the different direction that I've been in. Don't get me wrong. I can still go back and I can calculate the heat loss from an engine or determine how to make something operate more effectively. But I realize that my purpose and my impact is greater than what it once was. And so in doing so, I hope you guys can take some of this and be able to apply it to be more resilient leaders in the jobs and the functions that you have. Thank you for your time.